want to go? We've talked about it.
I know. I have to go.
Has to go.
We should drive there.
We've talked.
It began not with a headline or a photograph, but with a whisper. The kind that slips quietly through the cracks of the internet, born in the half-lit corners of fan forums and anonymous gossip pages before it gathers momentum and becomes too persistent to dismiss. And late one night, a short post appeared on a celebrity discussion board from a user claiming, without proof yet with unnerving confidence, to have worked on a film set with Jamie Dornan and Dakota Johnson years earlier. The message, compact but incendiary, hinting that there was something the public had never been told, something involving a baby, not in the crude, sensational way tabloids usually implied, but in a manner that suggested a private event, emotional and irreversible, something that had quietly altered the course of both their lives. And within hours, that single suggestion metastasized across social media platforms, mutating into bolder claims and increasingly elaborate theories until phrases like hidden baby and secret child trended alongside their names, fans and casual observers alike suddenly transforming into amateur investigators, dissecting old interviews frame by frame, replaying behind-the-scenes footage, scrutinizing red carpet body language, and rewatching scenes from the 50 Shades trilogy with forensic intensity, convinced that what once looked like mere acting now revealed something truer, more exposed, because from the beginning their on-screen chemistry had felt unusually charged, less like a carefully constructed performance and more like an unguarded emotional current. And even during production this had not gone unnoticed, with crew members later recalling, sometimes anonymously and sometimes with visible discomfort, that Dornan and Johnson required little direction during intimate scenes, that their timing and physical ease seemed instinctive, that there were moments between takes when conversation lingered too long and eye contact held just a fraction beyond what professionalism required, details that at the time were dismissed as the byproduct of intense roles but which, in the wake of the rumor, were retroactively reinterpreted as clues pointing towards something deeper. And what distinguished this particular wave of speculation from countless other Hollywood myths was its somber, almost mournful tone, because it did not frame the alleged secret as a triumph or a scandal but as a loss, something tender and painful that had been quietly buried beneath contracts, public images, and the relentless machinery of fame, prompting journalists to revisit old quotations with renewed suspicion, including a comment Johnson once made in an interview where she said she carried a part of Dornan with her that no one else could understand, a line previously praised for its poetic ambiguity but now seized upon as coded confession, and Dornan's own enigmatic remark years later that some connections do not fade even when they are not supposed to exist, which fans now treated less as philosophical musing and more as inadvertent admission. And as timelines were reconstructed and calendars compared, people noticed that Johnson had withdrawn from public view for several months after filming concluded, officially citing exhaustion and a desire for rest, while around the same period Dornan canceled appearances and spoke vaguely about prioritizing family. Coincidences that rational minds explained easily yet which others stacked together like pieces of a puzzle, insisting that something profoundly personal had occurred, something too intimate and too complicated to ever be addressed openly. And through all of this both actors maintained an unbroken silence, issuing no denials, no clarifications, a quiet that many interpreted as meaningful because in celebrity culture silence is often read as a language of its own. And behind the scenes, unnamed sources describe Dornan as more withdrawn during that period, less inclined to engage with questions, his co-star, choosing introspection over explanation, while Johnson, in subsequent interviews, reportedly softened whenever his name surfaced, smiling with a trace of nostalgia that suggested remembrance tinged with regret. And as the press fed on this ambiguity, the story acquired a name, the hidden baby narrative, spawning headlines that ranged from the lurid to the abstract, some tabloids openly suggesting a concealed pregnancy while others proposed metaphorical interpretations, speculating that the baby symbolized a lost creative endeavor, a shared trauma, or even a private philanthropic project funded jointly and never acknowledged. Yet the absence of concrete information only intensified public fascination, encouraging fans to search obsessively for meaning in the smallest details, comparing Johnson's wrist tattoos to doodles Dornan once sketched during an interview, noting that he wore a silver bracelet identical to one she had modeled in a past photo shoot, elevating coincidence into evidence and aesthetics into alleged proof. And despite the invasive nature of this scrutiny, there was an oddly gentle quality to the discourse. Because unlike many celebrity scandals, this rumor was rarely framed with malice. Instead, it carried the tone of a ghost story or a forbidden romance, as though people were less interested in exposing wrongdoing and more compelled to understand a connection that seemed genuine yet constrained, a bond that felt unfinished. And, throughout this, Amelia Warner, Dornan's wife, remained publicly silent, declining to engage with what she reportedly viewed as fantasies, though her restraint was itself misread as significance by tabloids eager to infer jealousy, forgiveness, or quiet resilience where no statement existed. And what almost everyone agreed upon, even skeptics, was that the dynamic between Dornan and Johnson had always appeared distinct, raw in a way that defied easy categorization. And perhaps this was why the rumor resonated so deeply, because it tapped into a collective fascination with the idea that two people might share something profound and life-altering without ever openly crossing a line. A notion that challenged simplistic narratives of fidelity and betrayal. And as weeks passed and the story refused to dissipate, a fan reignited discussion by posting a still from 50 Shades Freed depicting Dornan's character holding a newborn, his expression stripped of swagger and dominance, replaced instead by something vulnerable and overwhelmed, accompanied by a caption insisting that he did not have to act in that moment, that the look in his eyes belonged not to Christian Grey but to Jamie himself, a claim impossible to verify yet emotionally persuasive to those already invested. And so the rumor persisted, not as established fact but as an enduring question mark hovering over their shared history, a modern myth sustained by fragments of truth, interpretive longing, and the human tendency to search for hidden meanings in the faces of those we watch from afar, reminding everyone that in the absence of answer, speculation will always rush to fill the void, especially when the story feels less like gossip and more like an elegy for something that may never have been allowed to exist. It began, as these things so often do in the modern age, not with evidence or confirmation but with a murmur, a half-formed suggestion that drifted quietly through online spaces before taking on a life of its own. A whisper that seemed to emerge from nowhere yet somehow felt inevitable once it appeared, seated late one night on a celebrity gossip forum by an anonymous user who claimed to have worked on a film set years earlier alongside Jamie Dornan and Dakota Johnson. And although the post was brief, it carried an unsettling weight, hinting at a secret the public had never been told, something involving a baby, not in the sensational or scandal-hungry sense that tabloids usually favored, but as something deeply personal, emotionally complex, and quietly transformative. And within hours, that single suggestion ignited an extraordinary chain reaction, spreading across social media platforms where it was repeated, embellished, and reframed until phrases like hidden baby and secret child were circulating with alarming confidence, prompting fans to revisit the past with obsessive intensity, replaying interviews, dissecting behind-the-scenes footage, and scrutinizing every interaction between Dornan and Johnson during the years of the 50 Shades films as though meaning might finally reveal itself under enough pressure. And for many, the idea did not feel entirely implausible, because from the moment the pair first appeared on screen together, their chemistry had felt unusually charged, possessing a rawness that blurred the line between performance and genuine emotional connection. Something that even those involved in the production had quietly acknowledged at the time, with crew members later recalling, often under the cover of anonymity, that the two actors seemed to move in sync during intimate scenes, requiring minimal rehearsal, as though the physical and emotional rhythm came instinctively rather than through direction. And there were stories of hushed conversati after filming wrapped for the day, of long pauses and lingering glances when the cameras stopped rolling, moments that at the time were dismissed as professional closeness born of intense work but which, in the context of the rumor, were reinterpreted as fragments of something deeper and unresolved. What distinguished this particular wave of speculation from countless other Hollywood myths was its emotional register, because it did not present itself as a tale of reckless behavior or betrayal but rather as something faintly tragic, a suggestion of loss rather than excess, as though whatever the secret was, it had been shaped by restraint, sacrifice, and circumstances that left no room for openness. And this tone encouraged journalists and fans alike to revisit old remarks with fresh eyes, including Dakota Johnson's oft-quoted comment from an interview in which she said she carried a part of Jamie Dornan with her that no one else could understand, a line that had once been praised for its poetic sensitivity but now seemed to some like a veiled confession. While Dornan's own enigmatic statement years later that some connections do not fade even when they are not supposed to exist was pulled from obscurity and elevated to the status of coded admission. And as timelines were reconstructed with forensic enthusiasm, people began to notice patterns that felt significant when placed side by side, such as Johnson's extended absence from the public eye following the end of filming, officially attributed to exhaustion and a need for rest, coinciding uncomfortably with a period during which Dornan canceled several appearances and spoke vaguely about wanting to focus on family life, coincidences that skeptics quite reasonably dismissed as the ordinary rhythms of demanding careers but which others assembled into a narrative of concealment, insisting that something profoundly intimate had occurred, something too private and too complicated to ever be acknowledged publicly. Throughout the escalating speculation, neither Dornan nor Johnson offered comment, their silence unbroken and conspicuous in an industry where denials are often issued within hours. And for many, this quiet refusal to engage only deepened the sense of mystery, because silence, rightly or wrongly, is often read as meaningful. And behind closed doors, unnamed sources describe Dornan as more withdrawn during that period, less inclined to discuss his co-star, more introspective, while Johnson, in subsequent interviews, was said to soften whenever his name arose, smiling with a gentleness that suggested nostalgia tinged with something harder to articulate. A combination of warmth and restraint that audiences interpreted as remembrance rather than indifference. And as the press seized on this ambiguity, the story acquired a shorthand, the hidden baby narrative, spawning headlines that ranged from the lurid to the abstract, with some tabloids openly implying a concealed pregnancy while others adopted a more symbolic interpretation, proposing that the baby represented something metaphorical, perhaps a shared trauma, a creative endeavor that never came to fruition, or even a private philanthropic commitment undertaken together and deliberately kept from public view. Yet the lack of clarity only encouraged further conjecture, and fans began to trawl obsessively through details that might once have seemed insignificant, comparing the tattoos on Johnson's wrist to sketches Dornan had once doodled during an interview, pointing out that he wore a silver bracelet identical to one she had been photographed wearing years earlier, elevating coincidence into evidence and aesthetics into alleged proof of a hidden bond. Despite the invasive nature of this collective scrutiny, there was something unexpectedly tender in the way the story was discussed, because unlike many celebrity scandals, it was rarely framed with cruelty or mockery, instead carrying the tone of a modern myth or an unfinished love story, as though people were less interested in exposing wrongdoing than in understanding a connection that appeared genuine yet constrained by circumstance, contracts, and existing commitments. And throughout this, Amelia Warner, Dornan's wife, remained publicly silent, declining to respond to speculation that insiders claimed she regarded as fantasy, though her refusal to engage was itself interpreted by tabloids as meaningful, fueling unfounded narratives of jealousy, forgiveness, or quiet endurance, even as no concrete evidence supported such claims. And what most observers agreed upon, even those unconvinced by the rumor itself, was that the dynamic between Dornan and Johnson had always seemed unusually authentic, marked by a vulnerability that is difficult to manufacture and harder still to sustain purely for performance. And perhaps this was why the story resonated so powerfully, because it touched on a collective fascination with the idea that two people might share something profound and life-altering without ever openly crossing a line, challenging simplistic notions of fidelity, boundaries, and emotional intimacy. As weeks passed and the rumor refused to dissipate, it was reignited by a single image shared online. A still from 50 Shades Freed showing Dornan's character holding a newborn baby, his expression stripped of bravado and control, replaced by something fragile, almost startled, and the accompanying caption insisted that he was not acting in that moment, that the look in his eyes belonged not to Christian Grey but to Jamie himself, a claim impossible to substantiate yet emotionally persuasive to those already invested in the narrative. And so the story endured, not as established fact but as a persistent question mark hovering over their shared history, sustained by fragments of truth, interpretive longing, and the human tendency to search for meaning in the faces of those we observe from a distance.
To the Caribbean, and my one daughter Ava, she's like, oh, life is beautiful, and our nanny was saying to her, oh, is it this like in...
It began again with a single image and a simple caption, 3 words that cut through weeks of speculation and reignited everything people thought they already understood. That's Jamie? A fan had written beneath a still taken from the film, and almost overnight the conversation that had never truly disappeared roared back to life, because people insisted that the emotion captured in that moment was too raw, too unguarded to belong entirely to fiction, and somewhere between resurfaced. Interviews, recycled quotes, slowed-down video clips, and endless commentary threads. One question began to echo across tabloids, fan pages, podcasts, and late-night talk shows alike. What exactly was the baby Jamie Dornan and Dakota Johnson were hiding? A question that carried less accusation than longing, because no one could say precisely what it meant. Yet everyone felt certain it meant something, and in Hollywood, where denial is swift and narratives are carefully managed, prolonged silence is often read as confession. So when days turned into weeks and the phrase "hidden baby" hardened into a full-blown media storm, whispered on podcasts, dissected by fan analysts, and splashed across glossy magazine covers, accompanied by grainy photographs and breathless headlines, Jamie Dornan and Dakota Johnson once again found their names bound together by something more enduring than a film franchise. Only this time it was not on-screen desire that held public attention, but mystery, ambiguity, and the unsettling idea that something deeply human had slipped through the cracks of celebrity storytelling. Jamie remained silent throughout the initial surge, his representatives neither confirming nor denying a single detail, and in the absence of words, every pause, every refusal to comment became fuel for further conjecture, while Amelia Warner, always dignified and private, began to feel the weight of the noise pressing in from all sides, not because the public was hostile, but because it was hopeful, eager to believe in the possibility that beneath the polished machinery of Hollywood something authentic and unmanufactured had existed, something too delicate to be staged or explained. Away, and then, without fanfare, the moment everyone had been waiting for arrived in the most unexpected way. Not through a press release or a formal statement, but via a long-form interview on a popular podcast known for its intimacy and thoughtful conversation rather than sensationalism. And when Jamie appeared, visibly tired yet composed, listeners sensed immediately that this was not going to be a performance. Halfway through the episode, the host, renowned for her ability to ask difficult questions with gentleness rather than aggression, introduced the subject carefully, acknowledging how wild and persistent the story had become, referencing the rumors about him and Dakota and the baby fans could not stop talking about, and for a brief moment Jamie simply smiled, a faint, weary expression that suggested not amusement but the exhaustion of someone who has carried the same question for far too long, before looking down, rubbing his hands together and speaking in a measured, reflective tone, saying that it was strange what people chose to see, but understandable, because when something feels real on screen, audiences assume it must be real off screen too, and when the host, sensing the weight of the moment, asked softly whether there was any truth to it, Jamie hesitated just long enough for the collective breath of the internet to be held, then nodded slightly and said that there was truth, but not the kind people believed, a statement that exploded online within minutes. Strip had confirmed the hidden baby story, even as clips of the moment went viral and social media platforms filled with speculation and triumph. But those who stayed and listened to the full conversation heard something entirely different, something quieter and far more revealing. Jamie spoke not of scandal or secrecy but of pressure, intensity, and transformation, explaining that when he and Dakota made those films the experience was overwhelming in ways few people could fully understand, the roles demanding, the attention relentless, the scrutiny constant, and that through all of it they had created something together that they were genuinely proud of, something they had jokingly referred to as their baby, not because it was a child but because it was a shared creation, shaped by long days, emotional vulnerability, and mutual trust, something that belonged equally to both of them and yet to no one else. And as he spoke, his voice softened, acknowledging how deeply those years had shaped them, how they had grown through the experience, matured under pressure, and carried its lessons forward even as their lives moved in different directions. And when the host gently summarized his words by suggesting that the hidden baby people were searching for was the story itself, Jamie nodded, agreeing that the films, the memories, and the personal evolution they represented had demanded everything from them, and that perhaps this was why people still spoke about them as though they were something intimate and personal, because audiences had felt the truth in what they made together. That night the clip traveled across the world, but instead of mockery or scandal, something unexpectedly tender unfolded, as fans began sharing messages not of accusation but of gratitude, speaking about what the films had meant to them during certain periods of their lives, how they had watched Jamie and Dakota not merely as characters, but as people navigating growth in real time, and a few days later Dakota herself addressed the subject during a red carpet interview, answering with a calm, almost wistful smile when asked about Jamie's remarks, saying simply that she understood exactly what he meant, that what they had built together was something they would always care about. Not a secret baby, but a memory, precious and formative, and her words, delivered without defensiveness or drama, dissolved the speculation more effectively than any denial could have done. Because the truth, when finally articulated, was not sensational but profoundly human. Yet behind the softened explanations and public clarity, those closest to them maintained that the reality was still more complex than either actor had publicly admitted. Not in terms of scandal but in emotional depth, because what Jamie and Dakota had shared was not merely a professional collaboration but a profound emotional journey forged under extraordinary circumstances, the kind that leaves an invisible mark, shaping how people see themselves and the world long after the moment has passed. And Amelia understood this too, understanding it not as a threat but as part of the truth of her husband's life. And later that evening, as the noise finally began to subside and the house settled into quiet, she reached for Jamie's hand and told him he had handled it beautifully, and he admitted with relief that he simply wanted